Nice buns, soft, fluffy, and ultra-low net carbs. Discover Hero Bread, the delicious, ultra-low net carb bread with incredible taste and texture. Hero Bread has 0 grams of sugar and is under 100 calories per serving. Plus, high in fiber with 5 to 10 grams of protein per serving. Order from hero.co now and get 10% off your first purchase with promo code AH10. That's 10% off with code AH10. HERO.co.
Welcome to this podcast, episode for number 14. My name is Tim Mitra, and I'm in Toronto, Ontario, and I'm joined as usual by Jaime Lopez Jr. in Seattle, Washington.
How's it going?
All right. And Jonathan can't make it today. He just flew back in, and boy, his arm's tired. Anyhow, but he did leave us some fact checks, so let's roll with that, shall we? And so he said that 3127, Fox doesn't indeed hold the film rights to the Fantastic Four, as Jaime suspected. If Disney buys Fox, the only major Marvel character they won't hold the rights to would be Spider-Man, and of course, all his villains and supporting characters. So, but he's in the new Avengers movie, right? Avengers?
Yeah, and it was a big deal that Spider-Man Homecoming was going to cross over into the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Tony Stark, Iron Man.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
So it was like Avengers, Civil War, and then Spider-Man Homecoming is sort of its own movie, but still within the same universe, and then continuing on to Avengers Infinity War.
Cool. Yeah, I was just watching Inner Space, which I like to watch on Space Channel here, and they were talking about the big trailer that dropped, and I think we were speculating whether Jeremy Irons' character was going to be in it. He plays Hawkeye, is that right? Not Jeremy Irons, Jeremy something or other, the guy from the movie with the bombs and the
Hurt Locker. That's how I always think of that guy.
Yeah. That guy, the guy in the Hurt Locker. Yeah, him. He plays Hawkeye or something, right? The Arrow dude, the one that's married. Anyway, what's his name? Holy cow! Okay, we need the fact check guy here. Anyway, he's going to be in the show, and they have confirmed that Brie Larson is going to do Captain Marvel. She is right in the film. So all the major Marvel actors are going to be in the show, in this movie, right? So, and Thanos is going to finally have his day he's always been on the outskirts of those other movies, right?
Yeah, he's always been lurking and a little bit more involved in some than others. Like, I think Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one, was probably the one that he's the most. I think he's the most in for that one. I don't know.
Sure. I think
so, because he's actually they actually interact with him and talk to him. Not right. The Guardians of the Galaxy themselves, but some of the characters.
Oh, yeah. Anywho, so I get some follow up here. Toronto actress or Toronto actor Mia Kirshner, who we know and love from I think she plays Michael Burnham's adopted mother. Just drawing a blank on what her name is now, but also Spock's mom on Star Trek on Star Trek Discovery, and she was on Q Radio talking to Tom Power about a program she's starting called After Me Too, which talks about all the things that are going to be going on in popular culture, where all these bad men have been outed by this Me Too campaign. So she's talking about what we do after Me Too, and it's talking about moving on and how we can change the way society looks at sexual harassment and assault and more. So that's a good. I put a link in the show notes there to her interview, which you can find on Overcast or whatever podcatcher you prefer to use. So I'd certainly hopefully give that a list. It's a short piece there. Some of the rest of the stuff here in the show is Jonathan's stuff, so we're just going to wing it and go through it. So I have no idea what this one means. First look at Robin in the upcoming Teen Titans.
Yeah, so this is follow-up to when we talked about DC doing a live animated version of Titans. And I think we were talking about it in the context of doing it as one of the exclusive shows to their nascent or very soon-to-be released streaming service.
Right. Oh, I see. Okay. And Teen Titans, these are the sidekicks of all the various superheroes, right?
Yeah, for the most part, you have Robin and Wonder Girl and Kid Flash, Wally West, who eventually becomes the Flash and I think is still the Flash. I don't know. It's been a while since I've kept up with current DC Comics continuity, but you're right. It's generally Teen Titans was the one that was a little bit more youth friendly. They were all teenagers. And then Titans, I think, expanded from there as they're a little bit more adult and probably in their 20s, I think.
Right. Oh, I see. Yeah, it refers to them as Teen Titans here, but it's they've got listed Raven, Starfire, and Beast Boy, I guess, which are the Titans? ?
Yeah, Cyborg is in there as well. Normally, for the comic book continuity or from the Cartoon Network Teen Titans animated series.
Cool. Right.
Kind of, I'm guessing since Cyborg is in the DC Extended Universe movies, I imagine he's probably not going to show up here on this show, especially because he's probably rather expensive to produce, given he's largely CGI and a little bit of human face showing through.
Okay. And apparently Sabrina the Teenage Witch is coming to Netflix and a 2-season order. So this is a different. Oh, I guess Sabrina was a character offshoot from. There was a TV show called Sabrina on TV a while ago, right?
Yes, you're probably thinking of the sitcom version of with starring Melissa Joan Hart.
Right. Yeah.
On one of those side channels like UPN or CW or something. Right. It wasn't like a primary channel, but definitely a little bit more like
Bewitched, I think, than a bit more like the show Bewitched was back in the day, right? This is out of the Riverdale show, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the intention. So there actually is the as they show here in the photo, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, which is a little bit more of a mature take on the character, similar to, I guess, some of the modern takes on the Archie Comics Riverdale type thing, where they do have like the normal, like for kids, funny comics, and then they'll have the ones that are a little bit more mature, where it could be weird things like, oh, what if we showed them in the future where Archie has, in separate universes or separate continuities, married Betty or Veronica, or where he's faced off against the Predator, or, all sorts of other things. Like, I guess it's been rather successful because they've been doing it for years. And I think this is continuing off of that same sort of mindset where they created the more mature, I think it's a CW show, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, well, Riverdale, yeah.
Riverdale. Yeah. And I guess it's done really well on Netflix reruns. And so they're going all in and say, hey, why don't we do that with like Sabrina, because we actually have money to do all the special effects work for the spooky, scary stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just want to look up a note here that see if we can get overcast on this thing. I just happened to be listening to Q Radio yesterday, and they were talking to a lady. I'm just going to find her name here. Alexandria Petsavas was on talking about how she's the person who curates the music for various shows, and just so happens she does the music for Riverdale. But where you may know her from is she also did the music for the OC. And apparently back in when the OC was first coming out, there wasn't sort of the whole iTunes network and stuff like that. And so a lot of bands that she would play on the show, they would premiere music on the OC. And she was the person who chose that stuff. Just sort of a closing the loop on the Riverdale show, because she also does the music selection for Riverdale. So have you watched that show at all, Riverdale?
I haven't, but I have seen it on the Suggested for You carousel on Netflix. So maybe I'll have to give it a try.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of wonder, have you seen it by any chance?
I think I've seen the ads for it, but I haven't really sat down and watched it. So I actually live in Riverdale. I live in the neighborhood I live in now is called Riverdale, actually, which is kind of funny, right?
Nice.
And Riverdale High is just down the road. Yeah, but there was a short-run TV show here in Toronto called Riverdale, which is about this neighborhood, which is, again, ironic as well. Anywho, so moving on, we got, Stranger Things officially getting a 3rd season. That's interesting.
Yeah, they even put it as sort of like it's a no-brainer. Of course, it's such a success for them. No spoilers for season 2, but it definitely, similar to season 1, ends in a way where like, yeah, you feel satisfied if they don't have a 3rd season, but you see how they can make a 3rd one. So I feel like that's the best balance where, heaven forbid it had been, not picked up. We'd be like, all right, well, I'm satisfied with these 2 seasons, but now that there is a 3rd season, like, yes, awesome. You can start getting prepared.
Right. And of course, the header image on their Twitter account is upside down.
Right.
Which is a bit of a spoiler. All right. So I have no idea what the Ninja trailer talks about with Batman. Is that a new movie coming out, or?
It is actually the one. Let me see which one Jonathan put on here in the links, because the one this is completely Japanese. I have no clue. I believe it is either a rather short animated series or a movie or kind of an in-between thing that Japan tends to do, the OVAs. Sure. Like essentially like a multi-part episode that you might as well consider consider an animated movie. Except the conceit here is that you have Batman and the Joker and other cast of characters from the DC universe as if it took place in the samurai period during Japan's history. So the art style is rather interesting. It reminds me a little bit of, I can't name the show, but another show it reminds me of is when there were these Japanese animated versions of Marvel's Wolverine and Iron Man, if I'm not mistaken, where it's sort of like a Japanese take on the characters, where they're largely the same, but then they change things a little bit to be a bit more friendly to Japanese audiences.
Right, cool. The next link he's got in here is apparently Columbia is making a line of Star Wars Hoth jackets. So you can get the Echo base jacket that Luke Skywalker wears, which they claim is warmer than a Tauntaun, and also got Han Solo, the Han Solo jacket, the Echo base parka, and if you like the ladies version, they have the Leia Organa version of Echo base jacket, with the vest and the over jacket, all done up exactly like they were on Hoth, but of course made by Columbia. So with waterproof and thermal garments to keep you warm on those cold Hoth winter nights. And apparently they'll be available by the time this podcast airs. They will definitely be available because as we record, there's like 1 hour left to go. So Star Wars Battlefront 2, another piece that Jonathan's put here for us, apparently has fixed up the gameplay on Battlefront 2 to address the complaints that people were having. So they've increased their credit cap of 500 credits to 1,500 credits, giving people more chance to play the game. They've rolled out a DICE update. According to DICE, there's an update out that increases the amount of credits that can earn per match. So I guess making it easier for them to grind and earn different characters as they were. So I guess they're just making it more equitable to play. What else we got here? Star Wars cash. Interesting. So Star Wars is getting some Last Jedi pound notes going for £100, money going towards charity. So they're printing up some legal tender. They've got Kylo Ren and they've got Luke and Rey on one of the notes. And I guess that all the money is going towards charity. Of course, you could never be without cash in this era when nobody uses money anymore. Videos start playing in my head. Star Wars Battlefront 2 has been updated to speed up the progression in which players can earn cash, earn points to earn their various things. So I guess you can grind for 20 hours instead of 40 hours now. I guess there was a daily credit cap in arcade mode. They've raised it from 500 to 1,500 credits so that people can players can learn even more credits so that they can purchase characters, I guess, that they need to play against. So I don't know and there's been quite a bit of backlash from, as you mentioned, I think some European markets had complained about it as well, right? So
yeah, it was so bad they started thinking about maybe it's actually gambling. We should look at the legality of this system.
Yeah.
EA really put itself at risk and kind of the whole AAA industry at risk in terms of being able to do this sort of thing. And now they're having more government attention on their actions.
Right. And I think that Jonathan mentioned last week that Disney has sort of weighed into it and sort of said, that they're not pleased with the way their properties are being dealt with here in this case, right? So
yeah, I mean, I don't know if they disagree with the money making side of it, because I'm almost certain that Disney gets some sort of royalty beyond just the rights, but they're certainly not happy with having it be so bad that there's all of this bad publicity right before The Last Jedi premieres.
So this one's you. Hey, honey, you got something about Altered Carbon.
Yes, this is something that's going to be coming out on Netflix starting February 2nd, 2018, but it's a new sci-fi series. It's apparently based on an award-winning novel. It takes place in a future where the human mind can now be digitized and downloaded into a cortical stack and placed into new bodies called sleeves.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this property. I imagine it
sounds kind of Matrix-y to me.
Right? Yeah, it sounds like a couple other things. Like we mentioned Surrogate, I think, were with Bruce Willis and a few other things that kind of come to mind, like Transcendence and stuff. But as a note here, because I have it here, the trailer that we'll link in the show notes for those of you transporting home, this is not safe for work. So I highly recommend you watch this in an area where it's like okay, because there's a little bit of nudity.
Oh, nice.
It's not like pornographic nudity, but it's
not safe for work.
Nudity of male and female bodies, because it's like the bodies don't mean anything. Is the sort of the gist I get of it, right? It's like they're just disposable sort of things you get rid of, and you get a new body, so you live forever essentially.
Interesting, cool. And you got another one here. Wolverine is a new Wolverine movie. This is.
No. I see why you think that, because the art style makes it look like that. No, this is Marvel's first scripted podcast that's coming out on Stitcher Premium.
Okay.
And it's a series that's going to kick off with a 10-episode season that's apparently going to be, I guess, like an old school radio drama. That's sort of how
or an audiobook kind of thing. Yeah, I guess a radio drama would probably be like that, yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like they're going to have, sound effects and everything. It's not just a narrator getting to the audiobook side. I think it's going to be a little bit more engaged. Like, oh, he's walking, ting, 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 ting. You can hear it like, they're like clanking on like metal plates and stuff. Oh, he's scratching. A little bit more professional than what I just did there, but kind of interesting that it's going to come out there. I don't think it's full exclusive. I think it's limited time exclusivity on Stitcher Premium service. So if you happen to be into that service, might be worth checking out. I kind of envision it being like a radio drama version of what LeVar Burton does on LeVar Burton Reads podcast. That's rather fantastic. It's just like one person reading and using different voices, and there is a little bit of audio engineering going on where they'll add a little bit of sounds in the background.
Sure, yeah. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and like there's a lot of the Star Wars books that are out right now. There's three books that fit in between the movies, like between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, and a couple of the characters that are in The Force Awakens are sort of part of this thing. And there's one guy who reads it, and he does this amazing set of voices. Like he does a voice of different aliens, as well as a kid and his mother, and then he does this really cool robot sort of voice, and it's just one guy doing the acting. And this also reminds me too of I have a set of discs upstairs that are I think BBC did a Lord of the Rings, Lord of the Rings, and it was like a 13 CD long epic thing. So that's probably what this is like, where they do a certain number of hours, and that's like the first episode, and then they carry on the next day kind of thing, or the next week or whatever. So interesting. Yeah, because I think Hugh Jackman's finished doing that movie, right? Or playing that character. Isn't that the gist of what the last movie was about? Yeah,
it was not only a goodbye to the character, but I think a goodbye to that actor.
Right, yeah.
And a rather good one too. I'd recommend people watch Logan if you haven't.
Oh yeah, I think that's probably my best, favorite of all the X movies. I think X-Men movies is probably my favorite one, but I wonder if you have to sort of see the other ones to sort of get the context though, right? So
I think it helps, but it certainly helps fill in the flavor. But I think at some point when we kind of run into a dead zone of like shows not being available and movies not being available, I think we'll all want to talk about what makes a successful superhero movie. And I think Logan is a really good example where if it didn't involve superheroes, it would still be basically the same movie. It's essentially a Western movie.
That's true. Yeah.
Being in that movie, and it would work just as well. And
I think that's sort of the Unforgiven of the X-Men sort of thing, right? Yeah, interesting. Huh.
It's a good movie in and of itself that also happens to be with superheroes, rather than being like, oh, it's a superhero movie, which means we need nonstop action and blah, 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 right? Like, it's like, no, it's actually a good movie, and that's why people loved it.
Yeah, I kind of wonder, like, have you seen the movie The Book of Eli?
Oh, that's the one with
Denzel Washington?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, so I wonder what it would be like for someone to go see Logan who never knew about the X-Men sort of universe, right? Because if you think about it, he's an older guy who kind of turns up on this place, and he runs into Jean-Luc Picard, and who's got this sort of mental capability to move things around, but you don't know why, right? Professor X I'm talking about, right? Or is it Professor X or Dr. X? Professor X, yeah. Charles Xavier, right? He's got this sort of, he's got this mental capability, but now that he's old and he's got dementia and stuff like that, it's now an issue for him, right? So I think he lives inside a big metal can or whatever, like an old abandoned oil refinery kind of or oil storage tanker thing. So he can't really, cast his mental strength outside of that small area, right? And these two sort of old, feeble guys getting together and kind of reminiscing and trying to, deal with the unfinished business that they have between each other, right? And then you introduce this young girl into the mix, right? And again, I'm not spoiling the movie at all, right? Even just sort of laying out the players, right? And then where it goes from there, and like the comedy ensues, and the antics they get up to, that kind of stuff. No, it's a very serious movie. It's a great movie, actually, very very well told, I think, right? And it's that same sort of wounded warrior kind of epic, right? Kind of like Gladiator and things like that as well, right? Cool. So what else have we got coming from Jordan Peele, honey? What do you got for us there?
Yeah, we talked about this before on the show, but I think at that point it was just a rumor. Now it's actually confirmed by CBS itself, who has announced today that it's issued a series order for a revival of the Twilight Zone with Jordan Peele doing the executive production, some others in there as well. For those who don't know Jordan Peele, he is one half of the comedy duo Key and Peele from Comedy Central, but also notably recently was the director for the fantastic, I highly recommend, movie Get Out.
Right.
I can't even talk about it too much without spoiling it, but it's a rather good movie. It covers race relations in a way you've probably never seen before.
Right. Yeah, I do have to watch that one too. It's funny, the Twilight Zone on Space Channel here at 7:30, I think it is. They've been rebroadcasting the Twilight Zone episodes, so I've been watching a lot of them, sort of catch up on them if people haven't seen them. They're from 1959 on CBS. Rod Sterling created this sort of alternate set of tales for people to watch. Very sort of very interesting, just sort of mind twisty, parallel universe-y kind of trippy stories. A lot of them like nuclear holocaust and stuff like that. Things that were the scary things of the time, sort of played out in sort of these sort of short stories, if you will, that were the Twilight Zone. And I think they tried to do the Twilight Zone TV show in the 80s, I want to say, right? Or was it not?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think there was a revival of some sort for that. And it should be noted here that, boy, oh boy, I kind of guessed this would be the case, but it's going to be exclusive to CBS All Access.
I was going to say,
in the United States. I imagine it'll probably be free on Netflix or something for Canada.
Or probably Space Channel or Showcase or whoever owns the rights to that stuff, right? So
so CBS All Access after Discovery ends is probably going to end up continuing to stay on my my list of bills, I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm paying for Amazon Prime. If it wasn't for the free shipping, I wouldn't be using it much watching TV. But we'll talk about that on the other podcast later on. All right. WarGames reboot. WarGames, really? What's this about? He said, clicking on the link.
This one requires some context. So one, I think people need to be aware of the 1980s movie starring Matthew Broderick called WarGames, where a young hacker, back in the days before that was a rather negative thing. Like this is literally a guy just like hacking on his computer and accidentally breaks into a U.S. military nuclear simulation, what he believes to be a game that actually turns out to be an actual interface to, this artificial intelligence is going to blow up the world by, firing off the nukes, sort of thing. This video game company that's been involved with this is also noted for having created the rather interesting interactive story called Her Story, a game where you almost sort of experience the game by playing as I forget the plot, but you're like an investigator, let's say, and you're reviewing all of these clips in this database about this woman who's been brought in for questioning related to a murder that has occurred. And without spoiling much, you essentially find out more details by listening very close attention to dates, places, names, relationships, that sort of thing she mentions, and you end up having to do like searching on the database to find other clips that will inevitably lead you to the conclusion. That same company is going to be doing a interactive experience / video game called #WarGames that I'm guessing will be very similar, where the way that you interact with the game will change your experience of what the story is.
Oh, really? Cool. Yeah. Like those choose your adventure kind of games, right?
Yeah, that's kind of what I think about it as.
So is it a game or is it a movie that's coming out?
The link here for Gizmodo is rather unclear. A different story I saw made it sound more video gamey to me. Like it's actually going to be like, her story available.
Oh, I see, but told through the same sort of story, right?
So they call it like an interactive experience. I think because it's kind of in between. It's not really like a movie that a TV show. You just sit down, you watch it, you don't interact at all, nor is it quite as interactive as a straight up mechanics driven game like, Super Mario or Sonic the Hedgehog. It's kind of a little bit more in between. It's similar to the Telltale series of games where you have some control of where the plot goes by making choices along the way.
Right. Okay. All right. So let's talk about spoilers for those of you coming up and not paying attention. We're going to be talking about the Orville episode number 11, New Dimensions. So Jaime, you want to do the recap?
Yeah. So this episode of the Orville, I think is the bottle episode for John Lamar.
The bottle episode?
Is that the right term? I might be using the wrong term, but remember we were talking about these different character episodes.
Maybe? Yeah. But yeah.
There's an actual term, and we'll need Jonathan to fact check this, but the idea is there's like an episode dedicated to let's learn about this particular character. And we've had that for just about everybody in the main cast.
Sure, yeah.
In this one, it begins with Lamar and Gordon, the pilot. They prank Yaphet, the gelatinous engineer, by somehow removing a piece of his body and putting it in the buffet, where Bortus ends up consuming it, and it leads to a lot of a comedy there.
Right, yeah.
Part of the context is that this is at a party. The reason for the buffet is that the chief engineer is leaving the Orville, so he's going to get an opportunity to design a space station, which future speculation, if they turn out to, like a spin-off as like a Deep Space Nine sort of thing, I'm going to be laughing until I fall out of my chair.
Really? Okay.
Because, we've said that like this show is like the spiritual successor or shadow or parallel to the Next Generation. So having it turn into a Deep Space Nine sort of thing would be quite humorous to me. But back to the recap. So while reviewing, what sort of punishment do we want to do? Admonishment on Lamar's record. Kelly looks through the first officer. She looks at the records and realizes, wait a minute, Lamar's got these super high test scores from the academy, and she ends up quizzing him about it. And it turns out that he grew up on kind of like a farming or small knit community where it was really more blue collar job. You just do your work and have your beer and go home sort of thing. And in order to fit in, he decided not to show off his intellectual skills. So he wouldn't get beat up as like the weird dork. And at this point, Kelly's like, well, I'm just going to see if I can convince Captain Mercer, like, hey, we need a new chief engineer. Maybe we should give Lamar a try. And of course, this sounds crazy because, Yaphet is the next one in line. He's already an engineer, and he's also has not just committed, this bodily crime on another part of the crew. It's around this time that the ship collides with a spatial anomaly that causes weird things to happen. Like a plant in one area is like suddenly just like dead. It looks like it's dried out and past its prime. They run into a smuggling ship that also they try to convince, hey, you should watch out for this particular anomaly. He says, whatever, you're not the boss of me. Runs into the anomaly. That ship loses all power. The Orville goes over to investigate. They realize that dude is like straight up dead and he looks horrific. They also realize he's smuggling krill weapons. The krill, you might remember, being the main antagonist in one of the codes. And Mercer ends up along the way here giving a chance and say, hey, all right, let's see if Lamar can lead the crew here on the science and engineering crew on a mission to help figure out what the heck is going on with this anomaly. And they realize it's two-dimensional space that they ran across, and that's why everything was all messed up. The way they posited for the deaths of both the plant and the smuggler was that, when you have three-dimensional space, you have the ability for your DNA and all the proteins that are a three-dimensional helix. Those work great, but if you hit two-dimensional space unprotected, you end up flattening that structure and completely destroying the proteins. It's somewhere along the way here, the krill show up and are looking for their weapons, and so the crew sort of has no choice but to escape into the 2D space by protecting themselves in a quantum bubble. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was Lamar's suggestion with Yaphet to say, hey, like, can we do this? I think we can go in and hide to where the krill can't find us. Inside, they reference Flatland, the novel or novella perhaps from a very long time ago that covers what if the world was two-dimensional? What would society and life be like? And unfortunately, they realize that the quantum bubble that is protecting them from dying in two-dimensional space is also not stable, and they need to get the heck out of there. And so they end up using the one of the shuttles in two-dimensional space to tractor the Orville. And somewhere along the way, they make a Doctor Who reference, as well as Oscar the Grouch and Snoopy Doghouse reference, where they're going to have things larger on the inside than they are on the outside, sort of thing. And Lamar really takes command of the whole situation as being responsible for implementing this idea and admonishing some of the engineering crew who are blaming Yaphet for some of the mistakes here. And the crew gets out, and we have a little bit of a tender moment where Captain Mercer thanks Callie and kisses her on the cheek. And at the end of the episode, Lieutenant Commander John Lamar becomes chief engineer of the Orville.
Right. Yeah, it was an interesting episode. I mean, again, I guess it was an interesting story from that point of view, but again, I found it another weak episode. I don't know what I'm expecting from this show, to be honest with you. I didn't, I just found it expositionally very weak. The story wasn't that interesting to me. And I just don't buy Captain Mercer when he gets upset with what the crew does. Like, he was trying to chastise them for getting a guy to eat another guy, kind of thing. Like that's how he put it, right? Like, this doesn't make sense to me, right? How they approach it. So I don't know. What did you think about it?
Yeah, I wonder if this episode, even though, what is this, episode 11?
11, yeah.
Even though this is episode 11, I kind of feel like this episode must have been written earlier than the other, some of the others, because it feels like part of the early episodes of the Orville where they hadn't quite figured out the balance in the tone. Are they going to go funnier? Right. Are they going to go serious? Some of the best episodes that we've enjoyed on this show, I think, have been ones that lean a little bit more serious, but then have, some jokes here and there.
Comic relief. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting that they, I think that when Yaphet comes into the sick bay and he wants to talk to the doctor about not feeling well, she kind of reacts like, you're the last person I want to see. Well, which doesn't make sense in terms of continuity from the last episode, right? Where they get it on, right? If you remember, that was the last episode, wasn't it?
Because we've had a break. If it wasn't,
episode, it was the Rob Lowe episode where Rob Lowe is this he touches people and they become unable to control themselves, as it were, right? The Weinstein effect.
Yeah, I mean, granted, they were not quite themselves, and it's a little unclear from even that episode with the pheromones thing as to how much it makes you act beyond what you would ordinarily do. Is it like being slightly inebriated where you release inhibitions for things you already wanted to do? Or is it more like you're 3 sheets to the wind and you're doing things you would never do because you have no control whatsoever?
Yeah.
You're right. So it does feel, it doesn't feel like a plot hole per se, but it does feel like it's a little bit more of a reaction than what you would expect given the shared experience that they had.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of like where she was before in her relationship with him, but then kind of strange the way it came out. And then, and yet, he still has, he has the ability to go inside of, Bortus and retrieve himself. Right. So, I mean, there's some jokes at the expense of, Bortus's innards that they reuse throughout the show. But, and some of the comedy isn't that funny enough. Like, in shows like Family Guy and The Simpsons and stuff like that, or even South Park, it's just borderline ridiculous all the time. Right. And I think when we talked about this before, but I think when we kind of saw the Orville was coming out, we thought it would be that kind of Spaceballs kind of, thing like Mel Brooks did with Spaceballs, right? It was just like every second line was just camp, right? So when they try to be serious on this show, I especially with Seth MacFarlane, I just can't take him being serious. I wonder what he's like as a dad,
right?
Because when he looks like he's getting angry, I'm like, are you kidding? Really? Are you like, or as Jonathan says, it's kind of like Brian sort of chastising them, right? Because it's the Brian voice that he kind of has when he's trying to be stern and official, like, right? So
right,
yeah. Anywho, I don't know. know, it was just,
I think, it's not like my favorite episode. It's certainly not the worst. It's kind of in the middle. It's kind of an average episode of the Orville.
Yeah. So, whereas
I will say that I do think that the acting by Isaac's I think is a little bit underrated on the show, because he has a couple of moments. And I'm like, wow, that was acted really well, considering I literally cannot see this guy's face.
Oh yeah.
Because it's just a mask with two glowing bulbs.
Yeah, which is ridiculous in itself, right?
Yeah, and the joke with related to the "Are we bonding?" Yeah, where he goes and strokes Gordon's arm.
You got to tell the story. He was actually, they were talking about having a cat, like as a sort of something to have the crew bond, and Isaac says, "Why would we want a cat?" And Gordon, is it Gordon? Yeah, he explains that so you have some affection or whatever on the ship, and we could bond together and stuff like that. And then a few minutes later, you find Isaac petting Gordon, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
I think the other one towards the tail end of the episode that was a little bit telling, because they could have played it differently, was when Lamar overhears the engineers who are making fun of Yaphet and blaming him for their misfortunes. He really takes command and is like, "Hey, if you have anyone you want to blame, it's me. It was my idea," and takes charge of the situation. There's a little moment there where they show Isaac sort of looking at Lamar for just a little bit longer, as if to imply to the viewer that there's a realization like, oh wow, like he's actually taking command here, right? This is
right.
This is leadership. Whereas if they wanted to, I mean, Isaac's a robot, right? He just he looks at him and then looks immediately away. It's like, okay, robot, I don't care. That's not critical to my function. So
sure, yeah.
I think throughout this whole series, they've if you go back and rewatch, there are interesting little moments and tells that the actor is able to get through, even though he can't emote with his face.
Right. Yeah, it must be tough. I mean, because we were just talking on Roundabout just before this that communication, a lot of communication is body language, right? So which is kind of strange, because you can't get that. When Isaacs does speak, he doesn't just sit there and spew words like Sheldon or Spock does. He actually talks with his hands, if you will, right? Sort of thing.
Yeah,
which is kind of interesting. Yeah. Yeah, there was a character. I don't know if did you ever see a show called Barney Miller? Remember Barney Miller?
I'm familiar with the show, but I must admit I don't think I've really watched the show.
It was a New York cop show, right? But there was one police officer there. I'm trying to remember his name now, Dietrich or something like that, who was just off the wall. Like he was like the Isaac of the Barney Miller police station. Like all the the guys in Barney Miller police station, they all had their sort of like Abe Vigoda was the old cop on it, and Hal Linden was the Barney Miller character, and they had a Chinese officer playing the Oriental stereotypes, and then they had a young kid kind of like Woody on Cheers, right? But they had this guy who was off the wall, like, and he was just like this. Like the things he said on the show, you kind of did a double take, because they were never just things a smart person would say. It was things that a very intelligent person would say. And I find Isaac is that same kind of character. Like just sort of, there's more going on there than just what you're seeing. Like you said, it takes repeated watchings to sort of catch the nuance of what he's doing, right? So it was just like I said, there's one character on the show who I think his name was Landisberg or something like that was his last name. He's not with us anymore, but yeah, he was super funny on that show, like from the point of view, but not funny haha, but funny, oh my god, that was incredibly intelligently funny, sort of thing. Anywho, I digress. We'll people have to go back and try and find Barney Miller and watch it and see what I'm talking about. Jonathan may recall. We'll find out next week when he joins us again. All right. Anything more we want to say about this show? There wasn't very much to it. Again, I think it's funny though, like when we talked about the 7 shows that are great, the 7 shows that are so-so, and 7 shows that are throwaway. Which one do you think this one fits into? Probably the so-so ones, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's kind of an average episode. If you missed it, you wouldn't miss much other than changing of the guard at the chief engineer position.
Sure. Yeah. And that was kind of unceremonious. It was just sort of, you would kind of wonder, like, why is the actor leaving the show? What's the point? Or was he only signed on to be the chief for a number of episodes, right? Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Very strange. Yeah. And the buffets are kind of weird. The food they feed these people. strange looking things. All right. So you have a pick this week, right?
I do. It's a Netflix show that it's not a want to see because I actually got around to binging it this past weekend. It's called Dark. And how do I describe the premise without giving away? So I'll read the Netflix description, which says, in 2019, a local boy's disappearance strokes fear in the residents of Winden, a small German town with a strange and tragic history. So off the cuff, it sort of sounds like, oh, is this like German Stranger Things? Just sort of like, yeah, it's like, oh, it sounds like the trailer made it seem like German Stranger Things, and it's really not. It's if you go in expecting Stranger Things, it's not at all like that. It's not an homage to the 80s. It's not quite as funny. It definitely leans a little bit more in the dark and horrific. And a big reason for bringing it up on this show is that it leans in the like science horror or science mystery. I'm not really sure what genre.
X-Files kind of thing, or
yeah, kind of like X-Files. Yeah, highly recommend. It's 10 episodes, and I don't think it stars anybody that I happened to recognize. It looks like it was a German show that was picked up by Netflix to bring across.
Right. Oh, I see. Right. Okay. Cool. Is it? But it's all done in English?
That's a good question.
We just watched it.
Well, because I didn't go in to change the settings because it was like, well, I'll just leave the remote control alone and just let the binge happen. It has English subtitles, and I think they have an English dub, which is what we...
Oh, I see. Right.
So it was dubbed and subtitled, but if I were to go back, I would wager that they probably have the original German language as well if you want to listen to it that way, and then also have the English subtitles.
Yeah, I kind of wondered about that because when I was watching Netflix the other day, I was thinking like, okay, well, that's the difference between like if you have a disc, you can switch the language, but in Netflix you can switch the language if there's an English, like another audio track, I guess so, right? Because what if you do if you're French or Spanish, right? Yeah,
and it's not for everything, but for the shows and the content that you do have for that, it's rather appreciated. And I would say for this one, the dubbing was actually pretty good. I feel like the voice actors that you chose were pretty well represented, and it was not very distracting, which you can sometimes end up with in a dub. I think people are probably thinking of like those old 1980s kung fu movies from Hong Kong.
Well, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon they had an English soundtrack as well, which was a lot easier to watch on the Blu-ray or the DVD, but it didn't match their mouths exactly. But you know what I mean? Like the old kung fu movies, those were ridiculous the way they used to do those, right?
Yeah,
voices were very exaggerated too, right?
Yeah, I think a parody movie, Kung Pao, did the best example of this, where they took stitched together a few kung fu movies, and at one point, some guy is talking to his friend, and you can see the Chinese actor moving his mouth for about 10 seconds, and then the English voice goes,
"Right, yeah,
I know." I was like, "What? No." I was like, "That's terrible dubbing, like actively terrible dubbing." This is kind of the opposite of that, because that was played for comedic effect.
Yeah, well, I guess there's so many different words you could say, right? So, I guess for what he was saying, yeah, it's funny stuff. All right, well, that sounds interesting. My pick obviously is Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Hello, like 6 more sleeps or 7 more sleeps till we get to see that baby. So a week from tomorrow, I will be watching Star Wars, and I believe you will too, right, Jaime?
Yes, I will be seeing it at 7 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday. The 14th?
Yeah, the 14th. So have you been avoiding the trailers and stuff that are all over TV? Because I mean, like, there's car commercials using the Star Wars theme. There's, we just saw the Columbia jackets for the Hoth ice scene and stuff like that. Ice Village, Ice Winter, Hoth Winter Planet. I don't know. I'll dub that in there somewhere. But yeah, like car commercials are using the Last Jedi theme music and stuff like that as well. And there's been all these different cuts of the trailer that I've seen, but I've been sort of fast forwarding them on my PVR. I've been watching them. Don't want to ruin anything.
Yeah, I'm pretty hopeful that similar to The Force Awakens, even if you did watch the whole combination of the trailers, you still wouldn't know much of what's going on. I felt like I was still very surprised when I went into The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
So I've not been actively avoiding them, but I've not been actively seeking them out either, with the exception of the main trailer that came out on Monday Night Football.
That's true. And Rogue One was kind of a strange movie because we kind of know how Rogue One ends. Or did we know going in that it was going to end the way it did?
Well, without getting into too much spoiler territory, we knew it was the story of how the Death Star plans made their way. So we kind of knew that, well, it has to end somewhat positively, right? I mean, they must succeed. Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point of this whole movie? Is like, oh no, it turns out it was a completely different group of people who did this stuff, like some crazy fake. It doesn't, end like that. It doesn't go like that. But it was in a tricky situation where it's a it's an interquel where it's post Revenge of the Sith and pre A New Hope. So there's only so much that can sort of happen, right? You know, that like, okay, well, they got to get from point A to point B, right? But the story is, how do they get there?
Right. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. All right. So, hey, Jaime, if people want to find you on the internet, where do they look?
I'm on Twitter as @DevWithAHair.
All right. As I always say, my name is Timitra, Timmitra on the Twitcher machine, and we will see you guys in the future. Bye.
Bye.
That concludes another episode of Spotcast, streamed to you via subspace signal. I'm friend of the show, Greg Keogh, joining you from Sector 001. If you want to find out more about the podcast or see the episode show notes, visit the Spotcast website at spotcast.com. You can get in touch with your Star Trek nerd hosts on the website or follow them on Twitter. They're @Spotcast. If you have feedback or questions, send them a tweet with the hashtag AskSpotcast. If you like the show, please consider recommending it to a friend, writing a review on iTunes, or pledging any amount of Gold Press Platinum at patreon.com/Spotcast. You can find details on how to help them out on the website, spotcast.com/sponsor us. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the future. Wishing you peace and long life.
So, where's my phone? It's over there. I gotta get my phone so I can text him. Oh, no. Yeah, I gotta get my phone. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Talk amongst yourselves.
To myself, apparently.
Gear Patrol calls their new dive watch the best sub-$500 dive watch. Full stop. Men's Health rated them as the most stylish solar watch in the game. Who are we talking about? It's Movement. They're leveling up your gift giving with the sleekest watches you can buy and the biggest deals of the season. Shop 30 to 50% off Movement's innovative California clean watches, jewelry, and accessories with fast free shipping and returns now at MVMT.com. That's MVMT.com.